So you're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com Tijuana. I'm joined by my friend Lightalk, and today we welcome synthesizer slinker and noted tone glower Nick Zanca to the show. He's described his tracks as distinct rooms with their own embedded environments. Nick Zanca has been uploading to Bandcamp since he first dropped early tracks as Mr. Lies back in 2012. Today, we've caught Nick in the middle of a mogul move. Last year, he produced Wendy Eisenberg's Auto. He just released Asemix down to its final physical cassette copies, actually, with Maurice, and plotting a full-length debut under his own name for Full Spectrum Records in the fall. So, Nick, needless to say, there's a lot on your plate. How's learning the fretless bass going in 2021?
Oh man, it's like literally the only musical activity that I find myself doing this summer.
Oh,
While
really?
I've been, yeah, well, just while I've been waiting for like these projects to come out. We had the Asemix thing come out probably about a month ago, and we've had this in the pipeline. Andrew and I have had this in the pipeline basically since finished the record in like February, and I think he responded to ask to release it, I think probably in like April or May. So it's been a while, kind of in the can. But to answer the fretless bass question, yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun as hell. I purchased I have it right in the corner here. It's this it's just like a Mexican jazz bass from, I think it was made like 20 years ago, and it still has like the fret markers on it and stuff,
Yeah.
but like it really is like a whole different instrument than the regular
Yeah.
fretted bass. I feel like, I mean, not even just in terms of like intonation and like having to work that out, but I don't know, you can kind of turn it into a lead instrument. And so kind of what I've been doing is I've been slowly working my way through all the like Jocko bass lines on like the
Oh, nice.
Joni Mitchell Shadows and Light
Yeah.
album, which is like a really fucking good workout
Yeah.
for a bass player. And yeah, I think it's also, I think I kind of picked it up out of like a necessity. Like I'm primarily like a producer. I dabble in a lot of like different instruments, but I
Hmm.
don't really feel like I've like um like had a relationship with one to the level of like extension of the body, or like or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it's kind of like virtuosic. I don't know, I think for all intents and purposes sort of my ears are my instrument, more than anything else, and what they can like provide in like a production standpoint. But yeah, I think it's been really fun just like kind of like having this monogamous relationship
Yeah.
with an instrument for a bit. I haven't even really been like opening up Ableton and stuff. It's just
Whoa.
been like run it. I don't even have like a proper bass amp. I just like run it through my like Roland jazz chorus, which is like plenty of like mid-tone kind
Yeah.
of in itself. So
Whoa.
it's like perfect for that kind of thing. And I don't know. I have just been like cracking open like Portrait of Tracy, which is like you really don't realize like how difficult that stuff is. I mean, it's all natural harmonics, first of all, but like when you actually like sit down and play it, there are times where he's like creating like a harmonic by like pressing a fret down and then like stretching his hands like 4 frets like right at the bottom of the thing. And then
Yeah.
it's like I've literally like, I mean, like I play mainly like small, like my main bass for a while still is kind of is a Mustang, and so
Hmm.
I'm like used to playing like short scale kind of instruments, and so this is like it's definitely been a game changer, and it's been like a really good finger workout. So
I
to
love
speak.
that. I'm glad to hear that, your fingers have been getting a good workout this past 2020 or 2021 so far. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So I guess like before we jump into like the rest of the interview, you dedicated your show to For the Girls. Can you like tell us about them and the work that they do?
So they are a Brooklyn-based organization that raises money for Black trans folks in need. mainly for affirmative surgeries and rent. I think, to my understanding, they used to host a lot of like fundraising parties before the pandemic started,
Yeah.
and really since then they've kind of turned into more of a fundraising thing, directly working with people in the city. So yeah,
That's awesome. Thanks for choosing them and talking about the work that they
definitely.
do. I feel like that's a very important organization. So can people get involved? Can just like anybody like in the community get involved? Like what's the best way for people to help them out?
I believe they have like a PayPal or Venmo handle donations on their website. I need to look
Okay.
up exactly what it is. I should have done that before I got
That's
on here.
okay.
But I think if you look up For the Gwirls, it's GWORLS. You should be able to find it.
Cool. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, for sure.
So Maddie, did you want to do the, I guess like the first actual question we have here?
We'll start kicking things off because, well, you spent an era yourself making, to quote Wendy Eisenberg, computer guy laptop sound. And nothing against that as much, though, is just kind of going back genuinely to all of that. What would you say really strikes you as your first computer music memory?
That's a good question. I think like when I was like 7 or 8, probably like in like the like Windows 98 to
Oh,
XP sort of zone.
Nice.
Um, my dad had my dad is like he is like a businessman. He like has no music, but for some reason he had SoundForge on his computer. And I used to make like mashups. I
oh,
think I think in like when the Black Album by Jay-Z was
oh.
coming out,
Mhm.
and they like officially released, I think he was like one of the first rappers to like officially release on like streaming service, or not
Mhm.
this was before streaming services, my god,
iTunes then.
this is
So,
iTunes, but he had like all of the official like acapellas of like the Black Album. And I don't even really remember like listening to the Black Album like in full that way, but I like developed a really specific relationship. I'm probably like 10 or 11 here, like, to be honest. But like so this was a little later, but like yeah, I would like throw down like you know, loops from Radiohead songs with like Jay-Z's acapellas like in a different tempo.
so were you basically trying to
So
create like another Linkin Park Jay-Z mashup to kind of hit
yeah,
that?
it might have been.
hit
It
that
was
track?
definitely before. It was between like Danger Mouse's like Gray album that he did
Mhm.
with like the White album,
Mhm.
and then I think the like Numb Encore thing. I don't know. I mean, memory doesn't like serve me correctly, but yeah, I think it. So, but it was like it was SoundForge, I think, there, and also at the time I like was making like little radio plays for
Oh,
like middle school assignments and stuff, which was, I think at like one point there was um like a sixth grade project they were teaching us, for whatever reason in New Canaan, Connecticut, they were teaching us the Epic of Gilgamesh, or like a abridged sort of version of it. And
Yeah.
I did this project that was like a radio play, and like had my like sister and like mom like do some of the voice acting on it. It was very, very elaborate. I should try to find it somewhere. It's been a long time since I listened to it, but yeah, I think so. I think sort of the whole like sound design, non-music thing, in a sense, like I kind of cut my teeth early, I suppose. And then I don't know, that kind of became I don't know, I started playing in bands in like middle school and high school. I had this like pop punk band in high school, Ballet for Athletes.
Oh, sick.
We put out an EP, which I think
Can we still find that
probably
EP?
still exists somewhere. I produced it like in the basement of like our house, and like the drum recording is like nowhere near. Like it was definitely like one like 57 like pointed directly at the kit.
That's
or
sick.
something.
No snares
Um,
were mic'd.
Huh?
No snares were mic'd.
Yeah, no snares were mic'd. Not at all. And that was very much like we were all very obsessed with like Say Anything and like Brand New and like that kind of like wavelength of things.
That's sick, actually.
And then I there was like a music tech program at my high school that was taught by this woman, Miss Mace. And I basically, she like, our roles sort of like reversed, like, 1 month or 2 months in, when she like realized that I like kind of knew a little bit more about like Logic Pro than she did.
Yeah.
And like our roles sort of started to reverse. And I mean, that's a little bit hyperbolic. She was like a very influential teacher to me at the time, but yeah, I was doing a lot of like, music production, stuff back then. I didn't really get into my main digital audio workstation, which is Ableton, until I was like in college. I went to Columbia College, Chicago. And I basically learned Ableton. I kind of got looped in with like a group of friends of mine who are still like, I'm very close with, like, to this day, who all are doing their own, sort of like production projects and stuff now. But I basically learned Ableton by like watching them within like the first like 6 months of school. And we like started a production sort of collective. This was like 2012 at the time, so like the SoundCloud producer collective kind of microcosm was like reigning supreme. We were called Svengali, and it's this guy Rafa Alvarez, Different Sleep, was really kind of like it was him, and then my friend Nolan, who actually took the press photos for the Elazo record.
That's sick.
Yeah, and so yeah, I'm still like very much connected with all of those guys. And yeah, I basically, it was just kind of like a thing of like hotboxing the dorm room and just like
that's so sick.
Watching them sort of like work. We were all Take Care had just come out, so we were like very obsessed with 40. 40's production. Burial was starting to come out with the EPs, so we were all very much in that sort of like vein. And then I think Chicago somehow like Chicago blogs sort of like got a hold of what we were doing. This one guy, Tyler Onderi, who is now an A&R person at Father Daughter Records.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
He had a blog back in the day called Flashlight Tag, and then there was. Do you guys know what Portals is? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So Portals was like this blog, this collective of like blog. Everything was collectives back then.
Well, there was Hype Machine and Altered Zones were probably the two biggest ones I could think of.
No, totally. Yeah, I remember Altered Zones. God, that was like that was wild. That was like where I first found out about Caretaker and Halo and like so many other, like 2010s, I mean, that was a gold mine. But Portals was this collection of different blogs that kind of like got together and just sort of really boosted all of the DIY music that was happening kind of all over at the time. And Tyler is responsible for like breaking a lot of the artists that kind of like surfaced at the time. He was like among one of the first people to break Kitty Pryde when that was a thing. And then 100 Waters, I think Mitski at one point was like very, very, very on. People who've gone on and like have signed a Secretly Canadian or whatever, but it really started there. I digress. But anyway, he kind of wrote about like Rafa and Nolan and I's like music at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was and I was still like I had like a few different like production aliases and stuff. So this is really like pre Mr. Lies. But then I'm like coming upon this material. This is like I think like the winter semester of like 2011, 2012. And I'm not really like I'm kind of like cooping up and I like put and I like basically churn out these very sort of like nocturnal, tracks, which became like that EP with like False Astronomy and like Klima, Hidden Neighbors. Yeah. And I probably finished that. I was like, it was kind of like the stuff that I was working on in between like all-nighters at school. And I put that I put that out and he started blogging about it and it kind of like sort of got around. And then I put out this demo with my roommate Henry's girlfriend at the time, Jessica Blanchett. Yes. And it was totally a demo. She like came up with the melody and we literally like took I think like a philosophy class or something like that together. And then we got and she was like she was kind of she was doing like I think she did this one particular cover of Nude by Radiohead where she like really had like the delivery. Her delivery was just like,
oh man,
amazing. And so we got together and we probably churned that vocal out like literally monitors still on her like it was very DIY, not how I'm like running like recording sessions and stuff now. But she probably turned that out, put it on SoundCloud, and then the next day, Larry Fitzmaurice puts the demo on Pitchfork with the best.
That honestly might want to, I think, kind of just go into that realm because that had shocked, I think, both, especially me. I follow Larry's blog that he's been doing, and so the year 2013 plays a big part in a lot of the stuff he blogs about.
Oh yeah.
And his insights into kind of just working at Pitchfork at that time have been really invigorating because they were themselves, I think, really chasing after just any singles and things. And
they were giving out rising features, myself included, like candy. It was absolutely nuts. They were doing a lot to break in sort of new young blood. And yeah, it was very strange. But yeah, I think within that first month I like started getting hit up by like labels and stuff like that, and I made the rookie mistake of like signing to literally the first one that like offered advances and stuff. But yeah, within like that first month or two, I was like, and I'm like 19 years old, I'm like opening for like Tycho, and those were the first.
Wow.
That's insane.
Like on a West Coast tour, and those are the first Mr. Live shows that I ever played.
It's honestly very likely that my cousin went to one of those shows in San Diego because he dug that early 2010s Tycho stuff.
Oh man.
So yeah.
much different time and place. The Obama years when people were still careful. It sounds shitty, but it's like chill wave and stuff like that was definitely like the soundtrack to those like
definitely
carefree, for lack of a better term, neoliberal times.
What an era.
No, I mean for sure. But yeah, I put out the first record, and things just happened sort of like astronomically, just very, very fast. And it was almost like I acquired sort of like an audience before like a sense of self. I was this like, like semi-closeted like theater kid. Like I did theater in high school and stuff. And suddenly like, these legacy publications are giving like, this like 19, 20-year-old boy who barely knows himself, sort of, a bunch of, agency. And yeah, it was very, it was a whirlwind. I was probably there was a bit before I left the school to tour full time. There was a while where I was like literally playing shows almost like I was flying out to like play different shows and open up for people almost every weekend.
And you're
of
doing
my,
this
like,
while you were in school, right?
I was doing this, yeah, while I was in school.
That's insane.
And at one point, I mean, I remember having like kind of a pivotal conversation with my parents. Like it's either I ride this wave as far as I possibly can, or it's my GPA, basically.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, and then that kind of ended up not convincing them. I don't know that they were ever convinced. But yeah, and then I left. I left after my spring semester of my sophomore year, and I literally packed up. I was living in like a apartment with like two guys and two friends of mine in like Lakeview,
That's sick.
in Chicago, and then
Wow.
I literally like moved out, and then I was on a plane to Helsinki to that tour that I have basically centered this whole record I'm about to put out on.
That's honestly crazy. I love the entire history of like your basically musical career right now. That is insane, actually, just to think about how fast everything happened and kind of just like, I guess fell into place for you. Like that's insane.
It was a falling into place. It was also very scary.
Yeah, I was gonna
Existentially.
say, dude, if that happened to me in college, I would have been stressing. Like, I don't know if I would have been able to handle that. Like, that's honestly intense.
I'm already a pretty high strung person, so you can imagine.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
my
that's
God.
awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
would you say it worked out? Like, you happy with the outcome so far?
I'm really, I mean, I would say I am really thankful for honestly, like I'm more thankful than like, I mean, I am definitely like believe me, like I'm like definitely haunted by
Yeah.
that time as
Yeah.
well. But I'm more thankful because I was exposed really, really young to a kind of the vampirical nature of the music industry,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
really early.
I was gonna say, yeah.
And now I know what to avoid. And in like a production context, I can like kind of keep an eye out for, people I'm working with and
Yeah, yeah.
to tell them like and kind of, I mean, when I sort of see, I don't know. I mean, I think I think there is a definite privilege in being exposed to a lot of that stuff. My manager, at the time, he, without getting too much into it, he it turned out to be a bit of a crook, and I don't know. I mean, there have been a lot of other artists who've like come out over the people at like Lefse Records and
Yeah.
stuff. So it's like it's not any news, and they've tried to like rebrand as like several Portland-based
wow.
PR agencies, and people
Oh,
literally
God.
people like Tyler, who used to work for him,
Mhm.
used to literally be like, "Yo, like stay the fuck away from this guy."
Yeah.
But he was, speaking of Stengales, I mean, like he was, it was definitely, I'm not going to name, any names. His name, but like, I think, it's definitely, it's, I felt like very taken advantage of.
Mhm.
I was still very young. I was very, sort of, I think my blind spots in life were, just starting to, thin up at the time
Yeah.
at the time that, Mr. Lies was popping off. And yeah, I mean, I was like for all intents and purposes was definitely taken advantage of. So like, which I think, I mean, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it definitely is a blessing in disguise that I got away from, or that I was sort of exposed to that sort of
Lessons
early
learned,
on.
you know what I'm saying? Like lessons learned and stuff. Like
Exactly.
that's sick. So I guess that kind of brings us into like the next question we got here. So the final Mr. Lies record was released 2 years ago to this day in
That's
2019.
right.
In fact, today you called it the end of an era. Naturally, we wonder
era.
what brought you to start anew with Kasura Lazo. I totally mispronounced that.
Elazo, that's it.
Kasura Lazo. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What's your approach
got it.
towards the more abstract and experimental, even in improvisation?
So I think the main difference between my output as Mr. Lies and now, I think largely is outside, sort of influence in a sense.
Okay.
Even back then I was like, and I think this was kind of symptomatic of the whole kind of like chill wave or like kind of bass music sort of scene. It's it's an audience that is kind of, in a sense, I mean, unless you are a very particular kind of like production personality,
Mm-hmm.
it's the kind of scene that like the audience is stuck in Neverland. They never want to like grow up.
Yeah.
Is it
In a
PPR&B?
sense, I mean, not to literally harp on the people who are listening to the work, but it's like, after a while there is this expectation of like drops and like
Yeah.
rises and like very specific sound design and like production design sort of mechanics in a way. And I think back then I was making music kind of on the basis of like, oh, what will be deemed acceptable or favorable in the context of like these scenes. I wasn't necessarily doing it, for myself in a way. I decided to take time off between the record that I put out for Orchid Tapes in 2014, Shadow,
Mm-hmm.
and there was like 5 years between that. And in that time, I like formed a band and like put out a record and stuff. And I needed to like, I was kind of in this like megalomaniac, very like Adderall, hinged,
wow.
zone that was very much, it was like I didn't know really how to like collaborate and work with other people. And that's another like difference between then and now is like I'm collaborating like a ton now. But I think really when the whole reason that I decided to come back to the project and kind of like ended on my own terms while my band Quiet Friend was like gigging, I found another case of me finding a hard drive and going through like all of these like different session files and stuff, and kind of being like taken aback at like how much I was sitting on. And I formed a record out of that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to like sort of but I also think like in terms of like experimental music, like as a listener, improvisation and experimental electronics and all of this, it's like my lifeblood basically. And I don't feel like I've before that record I feel like I'd never really like allowed that side of me to come out. So it was still a compromise in the sense of like I was making like sort of an experimental pop record within the sort of like framework of the music that people had been used to like hearing. But I think the major difference between then and now is like I'm not doing any of any of this with like sort of audience in mind now. It's strictly for myself, and if people are on board, then hell yeah. If they're not, no harm, no foul.
Yeah,
you know?
that's cool. I mean, like I feel like especially it kind of goes back to like what you're talking about getting like involved in this like music industry thing like so early on. It's like you kind of get pigeonholed, you know, and it's like
So again, I mean, it was recorded completely remotely. There's stuff on that I want to get into, but it's also super invigorating, and it really matches with some of the stuff that the emo ambient scene or whatever's going on with the Marie, Lucy, Claire, other people in that center are doing. The right now, I guess the best way I could describe it, it gives me images of a toss up between kind of the Smart House in Ray Bradbury's "There Will Come Soft Rains" and then whatever Daniel Witchy was doing with his Flight of the Void Ship kind of recording there.
That's sick. I have not read Ray Bradbury or listened to that tape. So that's but that's awesome.
But that kind of, as you were mentioning there, the digital and organic, the weird and the where I end and you begin kind of aspect of you and Marie's recording. It's very difficult to tell where both of you are really playing it, or like who is doing who. And I think that's fascinating because
that's the whole point.
And then also it was released through, I forget the man's name, but who runs
Warm Winters. Adam Donoval, I think, is.
And yes, and Adam had previously been a TMT writer as well. And so to see him starting up his own label there and keeping that going.
Warm Winters is sick. I'm just say that real quick, but Warm Winters is awesome.
Warm Winters. I mean, that's part of like a whole scene of like Eastern Europe labels that are at like when you count like the trifecta is really like Warm Winters and then Mondoge.
Yeah, Mondoge. What was the other one you said? My bad.
Mappa Editions.
Oh,
have you ever heard of them?
I don't know if I know that one, to be honest.
Oh, they're amazing. They just put out a Nick Storing record that is like very, very. It's like I've been obsessed with it since it came out. But they do a lot of like more, you know, sort of like reductionist, quiet, sort of like kind of like a blend of like a little bit of a melange of like organic and artificial, you know, stuff, sort of on their that wavelength. But yeah, they are a label that is like very like definitely like alongside like, you know, Full Spectrum and you know a few of the other labels that like the Tone Glow crowd have been like really you know sort of attuned to. But yeah, in terms of Asemix, I think the indistinguishability between Mari and I is definitely something that we sort of, I don't think we ever really we hardly discussed anything. Basically, let me get into the kind of brief oral history of it. But basically, we still haven't met.
we're actually just
which is like the wildest part of like all of this. But and it's also wild because I've never felt like such a sense of like she's just such a kindred spirit to me. I think in a lot of senses, and like the way that we sort of like you know, I think we both try to ride the divide between like pop and abstraction in this kind of like, I mean, we both love, you know, Mark Hollis and like Skywalker.
That was gonna come up. Had that in the.
I will. And Sylvian, is that Secrets of the Beehive?
That was Secrets of the Beehive.
Okay, we can wax poetic on all of that shit.
We're gonna have a moment.
We're about to get in this territory. Damn, you are prepared, Maddie.
Always, dude. Always.
Hell yeah, love to see it. But yeah, so basically the story with that goes is that in March 2020, literally as on that like faded Friday the 13th for like everybody, the most like iconic Friday the 13th of all time. My boyfriend and my sister, who is also based here, and my family has like a spot by like a lake in Vermont that wasn't like being used at the time, so we packed for like a 5-day trip, and we ended up staying for like 3+ months.
Wow.
Yeah, we got like a whole rental car that we had to like return when you know, it was like this whole thing. But essentially, like Mari and I sort of, as we were kind of getting settled up there, she reached out to me, and we were very like I mean, we were definitely fans of like each other's work at the time. I think she was really into the last Mr. Lies record.
Okay.
And then I was like listening to some of her like Orange Milk stuff before the Mari record, and then also the duo with Claire that had like literally just come out.
Oh yeah.
The like on the Mondo's one,
Yeah.
with the world title that I can't remember like fully, but like so yeah, there was definitely mutual admiration for each other's work. And so she was like, I'm just gonna send you some like edited improvisations and stuff, and yeah, let's try this out. At the time, all I had with me was my laptop and my Zoom recorder, which are the two things I bring with me pretty much everywhere. There were a few, and I like set up in an attic room. There's like a old upright piano like at the house, and I think I had my like old Ibanez like cutaway like acoustic electric guitar or something.
Yeah.
But those are like literally the only instruments that I had while I was up there. And it became this thing where it was like our sort of unwritten rule that we sort of decided on is like she would send 3 Ableton session files with like 3 tracks of like edited stuff layered on top of each other each. I would come back to her with, you know, 3 other tracks, and then like start my own sketches. And it would be this thing where we would sort of like finish each other's sketches with like added layers.
Yeah.
And most of the I mean, I don't know about her, but like most of my contributions to it were like completely live. I would just set up like a max patch or something like that, and then just improvise. So I think that that's kind of what speaks to the whole like same room energy of the thing, without, you know, that actually being the reality. And yeah, I mean, the craziest thing about it is that we never really discussed what we were doing at all. So we would like, you know, it would, the whole exchange would like really be like, I mean, we would like talk and like text and get to know each other in a sort of way. But like in terms of the music, it was like, it was definitely the feeling of like, you know, improvising with someone in like the same room and getting to like sort of like study, you know, each other that way. And yeah, usually when I'm like working with like the Wendy record, for example, you know,
That over a great one.
hell yeah.
I love it a lot.
Like the one, we can also get into Wendy too, but I would love to talk about Wendy. But yeah, but usually like, so like with a collaborator like Wendy, we're doing like, you know, the most unhinged email threads, you know, discussing references and stuff. None of that is happening with Mari. It's just the Ableton session file, and that's it. And then by the summer, we had racked up probably like at least an hour's worth of material, which manifested itself in like a little 2-tracker that we just self-released for like, I think it was the Juneteenth Bandcamp fundraiser last year. And then I don't know, Hunter, my partner, and I, we returned to New York, I think in like late summer, and between then and then through to the winter, we ended up finishing the record that Warm Winters released.
Nice.
Yeah.
And in that time, at least the one thing that you guys have truly communicated on and put out for The Wire was the Asemix 15 Pop Abstraction Albums Primer,
That's
which
right.
is where probably the two that I saw on that, it would have been the later day David Sylvian. I've got Spirit over here, and then the second Gaster del Sol album, Upgrade and Afterlife. Although I'm much more inclined towards Crooked Cracker Fly, but it was those two. I was very interested in those, and kind of at least, and then also along with your top 25 that you had done from the last 25, the Mark Hollis. Mountains.
Okay. Which one would you like me to start with?
Let's honestly start with Mountains of the Moon, because I think this is that's the Mark Hollis album.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're calling it by like the original. Damn, you are ahead. I love this. I love this. I like had to like reach there, and I was like, yeah, I think I have seen the Discogs entry for that. Yeah, that record makes me cry. It's like the single, like, I don't know. I think first of all, Mark Hollis is like probably the most important musical thinker to like my practice. But like but it's true. Yeah. I think, you know, his I mean the famous quote of his, you know, like the before you play two notes, learn to play one, and then don't play any note unless you have a reason to. I mean, I think I that is one big you know, Zen cone. Like that I mean, that's an entire, I think that quote, and then pretty much, I mean, all of Talk's music, but particularly like the last two, and then the solo record. It's a whole music school in itself. Just the way that improvisation and songcraft are sort of treated on like the same sort of like terrain. Yeah, it's just like I mean, there was a while where I was like listening to like Laughing Stock. Like, I mean, there was a stretch of like, you know, that really began. The first time that I actually ever heard it was like or that I actually ever not that I ever heard it, but that it clicked with me was on that tour, the like Elazo tour, and I was like overlooking. I was on a train as the sun was rising to like Edinburgh, and like the train was going through the Scottish Highlands, and I just fucking cried. and like and it was like new grass, literally as the sun is like rising on the glen. It was just like the perfect quintessential I like that and the protests are like the two things I literally like remember from that tour prior to you know, working on this record. But like, yeah, I am complete ride or die for Mark Hollis. And also just like, I don't know, just, I mean, sort of like his whole thing really was like, he made records until he like literally couldn't imagine, you know, like music sounding, he worked on records until he like thought that like, until he like reached his ideal, which is such a way to be. And then you like, you know, I think the fact that solo record, you know, it ends with like literally 2 whole minutes of room tone. It's just like, I could like actually cry right now. Like it is like it is like the perfect punctuation mark to like end your career on. And he like did that, like he did like a minute of incidental score for Kelsey, like a Kelsey Grammer. Like no one cares about that.
He's also like, he's on a piano track for another band.
Oh, that's true. I think he did something for like Uncle as well, like uncredited. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, those records, I will literally never stop learning from them in terms of like the engineering and stuff. It was like definitely the biggest reference for Wendy and I, and the record that we made. I mean, that the drum tracks, like, you know, room mic up and then like literally all the other mics down. That, I mean, that's like that was definitely like directly lifted from that. I don't know. I think maybe a good transition for speaking of, but yeah, it's this songcraft to like improvisation sort of ratio. This idea of like hiring these like session musicians and sort of just not even giving them the full context for like the songcraft, because they probably weren't even like fully built at the time. And then just working around that, it's like this very specific energy or like duality of like first thought, best thought, and then like deep deliberation that I am always trying to like include a little bit of both of. And it's also something that I see, I'm going to transition this to Blemish now, because that record also does that, but it like, he literally goes as far as like writing top line over a Derek Bailey improv. Like, who thinks of that?
David Sylvian.
No, like, I mean, like, truly. And it's also like that. Speaking of like Wendy references, that was another one that came up because I don't know. I mean, I played that record for them, and like, I'll never forget. It was like in this apartment, like literally like out like near like my like sort of AV, and they just closed their eyes. What is this? And like it literally like, they are someone who is like deeply invested in like European improv and like that whole new romantic sophistopop, like Scritti Politti, Green Side, and like Prefab Sprout, like that is their world. So like you're hearing that for the first time. I mean, I can only imagine why it was like earth shattering.
And then
for them.
Beyond that point, it was something that kept getting, I think, missed in a lot of writing on Otto, was this need to wedge Deerhoofen when they were trying to wedge David Grubbs in. And there was a strong Gaster del Sol bent on a couple of the tracks that were singles, I would say. Oh God, I forget the names, but Futures in particular really sounded like a bit of Gaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely in the back of like the thought palace while I was like working on the working on the sessions for that. And then the biggest trip is that like David Grubbs has like sort of championed the record himself.
He liked my review.
yeah, I mean, we have like a little email thread going. He's heard Elazo, and yeah, he's like given it his cosign, which is just like,
oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the coolest things about this whole experience writing for like Tone Glow and stuff, is that I think a lot of there's like this sort of intergenerational exchange happening between different like generations of like experimental musicians and stuff. And I don't know, he is one of those guys alongside like Bill Orcutt, who is also apparently like an Otto fan.
Love Bill.
And
we love
and like I think, I don't know, I'm not gonna like name drop forever, but like I think there are a lot of people from past generations who are like definitely keeping their ear to the ground in terms of like what's going on with this new scene and stuff. And that's like unprecedented. I didn't even run into that kind of thing when Mr. Lies was happening. I mean, that's probably because everybody was 25. Everyone was the same age. But yeah, I think the intergenerational, like the communication between that, I mean, it's huge. It's like one of the things that makes me like really excited to kind of inhabit that world instead of the old one that I was in.
How did you fall into doing stuff with Joshua Mansu Kim there with Tone Glow?
Do you want the honest answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that Jim O'Rourke. I read that Jim O'Rourke interview.
Oh, yeah, that one.
And I was really affected by like how you know, personal it kind of got, and like wide encompassing, which is like, unfortunately, I feel like that's like the like stock answer for like everybody about like how did you get, sort of into tone glow. But I mean, it's true. And also my very dear friend Sonic Kim,
Mm.
um is, who I've known since we were both, teenagers, wrote for them.
Oh wow.
I mean, they were actually doing like a lot of the same, chill adjacent laptop stuff before like they got into their whole, Korean communist shamanism, sort of like free jazz, thing, which is like honestly some of the best, like the most soulful noise music that's like, happening right now.
Yeah.
Which is like, but like, yeah, but they were kind of involved, before, and then I just kind of hit Josh up, and I was like, hey, if you ever need an extra, set of ears or whatever, and then he was just kind of like, okay, why not? And then it started happening, and it's been really I think it's been a really good exercise for me to have, some sort of place to like siphon all of my, music opinions and stuff, which, I would have just like mercilessly, thrown onto social media or something like that before. Like, I feel like I have a place to I have a place to talk shit and also sing praises now. And it's like, I don't feel that I have to do that anywhere else, but for them.
I will say my favorite thing y'all have done was the October Warp reviews with Tecker and One O Tricks Point Never. Those were brutal. That One O Tricks Point Never was some of the most brutal, wonderful.
Sonic's review for that, where they like literally compile like, concert copy and like, installation is like,
I clicked.
It's one of the great short works of music criticism I've ever seen.
Please, I'll tell you though, all my biggest enemies right now are people signed to Warp Records that are pivoting to pop. They are my biggest enemies.
I'll save the shit talking for Tone Glow, I think, but I am right there with you. Let me just say that. Put it succinctly.
I guess, Thomas, I think we should probably talk a little bit about cassette or Elazo just quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So cassette or Elazo features recordings dating back to 2013 when you toured outside of the US, like we were talking about. The 3-part suite over the A side features tones reminiscent of Feels era Anko, with the titular cassette or Elazo recalls the fervor that Godspeed had documented during the 2012 Montreal protests. So
these are some points I'm throwing.
Yeah. I would have never thought of that, but sick.
Yeah, so what was the 2013 tour like and stuff? And
so yeah, I guess this is like literally picking up where we left off with like the whole, Mr. Lives, history like earlier. But yeah, we were a bunch of, kind of like late teens or to like mid 20s, like producers. I don't want to like name too many of them because I haven't sent the record to them yet, which is a process that I'm probably gonna have to do at some point and handle before the end of the month. But
yeah,
one of them has lots of X's and Y's in the name, I'll say that. But yeah, it was that was my first international tour that I ever my goodness. It was it was the first international tour that I ever did. And honestly, like, I just remember it being kind of like a nonstop, train travel, which is great, and Ryanair travel, which was not. And you know, it was something like, I mean, I was on tour for like, you know, pretty much the entirety of that like summer leading up until like the fall. One guy that I will mention, Giraffage, and I went to, you know, we started this like European tour, and then we ended up doing like North America for like, you know, and it was like probably like 20 dates in Europe, and then you know, we did you know, probably like a 10-date North American tour after that. I think it ended, or that particular leg of it ended with like a 4th of July show, like in San Francisco. But the actual Euro tour itself, yeah, I personally like it. I mean, like the whole vibe of it was definitely, you know, sort of dance floor, you know, heavy banger fodder, and then it would like, and then I would be mainly like opening up the sets and stuff. And I was definitely trying to, I mean, my production stuff at the time was like very like low BPM and stuff like that. And you know, I would like end up making like, you know, poor choices, like, you know, footwork edit. Chicago footwork was like huge at the footwork edits of like, you know, old Mr. Lies tracks and stuff. And I think it was like, I don't know. I was trying to force the dance. You know, it was like another thing of like trying to play to the crowd in a sense. I was trying, you know, so I don't remember. I don't remember like many of the shows, you know, being like that. You know, I was doing. I mean, as any, you know, laptop, you know, sort of like DJ, like not quite DJ, not quite, you know, laptop performer, you know, sort of goes, you know, at the time, you know, it was like, yeah, I mean, I was like forcing a square peg in a round hole a little bit, but, you know, I think at that point, I think it was also just a time when like, you know, I just left school. I had, you know, I was like barely really like talking with like friends. I kind of like cut everything out except for like the music at that time. So it was like it was sort of like a very alienating time, but it was all like also like, it was like a little bit like self-imposed, you know, like I was chasing basically the social capital at the time because it was like all I really like, it was all I really, you know, sort of like knew how to do. And so stumbling across that protest was like really the first time that I like, you know, I mean, it was like it was a wake up call in a sense. It was like I was experiencing something, you know, some sort of like, you know, humanitarian issue that was like so much bigger than like anything that like any of us on the bill, you know, were even doing. And I think that's largely why it stuck with me. But basically the story goes that we were like, you know, the protests that were going on were basically the result of like urban development plans, which I didn't know any of this like at the time.
Yeah.
But you know, they were building the Gezi Park in Istanbul is sort of I want to say it's like sort of the equivalent to like you know, Washington Square Park in New York. It's like you know, a place where like a lot of people, you know, sort of congregate, and they were gonna you know, tear down all the greenery and like build like a shopping mall and like you kind of, you know, kick out, you know, the sort of like houseless people that were, you know, living there at the time.
Yeah.
And that sort of became, and sort of like these like sit-ins sort of manifested in like very violent like police evictions and tear gassing and all of this stuff. And the promoter that the promoter was like driving us around, and you hear like on the second side of the record like a description of like what his description of like what it's like to be like, you know, tear gassed and all of this, and all of our responses are kind of like, oh, it sounds bad,
Yeah.
You know, like we're not really like registering like the weight of
Mhm.
you know, what was going on. But yeah, we stumbled across, we were on sort of the Asiatic side of like the city, which is like away from like where all of like the tumultuous like protests were going on. And we stumbled upon this like noise barrage protest of like people banging on pots and pans. And I was like, I don't even really know why I was like whipping out the field recorder all the time. I really couldn't tell you like if it was like for like, it was almost like I was like telepathically communicating with like
Mhm.
the version of myself now that's like, you know, sort of like making the stuff. But yeah, it was just such it made such a deep impression. And I remember losing the field recording and you know, being like, I can't believe I lost it. If I ever find it, I'm gonna like make a whole body of, you know, music about it. And then I'm cleaning my apartment, I think in like December of last year, and I find this like SD card under like a pile of like hard drives in this like desk drawer. And I pull it up and it's there. And I'm
Wow.
like, okay, time to time to make the donuts, as it were. And yeah, and then I probably like I organized the archive. And the craziest thing about um you know, kind of assembling that together is that I had no like real frame of reference of like you know, the conversations with like certain, beyond, you know, the people that I was you know, spending every day of this like tour with, you know, certain promoters and stuff. I like hardly remember faces, let alone cities that I was like going in. I mean, there are a few like signifiers like here and there in terms of like, I mean, you know, like if someone's speaking German or whatever, like I can, you know, kind of do the math.
Mhm.
But yeah, for a while, like I had to like stretch myself to in order to, you know, sort of like remember, you know, where you know, it's like, you know, I keep thinking of this like Walter Benjamin, you know, sort of passage about the work of memory collapsing time, and that's
Mhm.
kind of like what it was in a sense. You know, I like, yeah, I built the archive sort of from memory, and then I started this like month long improvisation you know, process where I just kind of recorded every day, and I would do like a little bit on the Wurlitzer. I would like, you know, assemble my, you know, kind of deconstructed kit and like record that. And yeah, there was no real impetus for like how it would all sort of be pieced together. You know, but it just slowly sort of assembled itself through, you know, kind of like this sort of like bricolage, you know, cut and paste, you know, sort of sense.
Wow.
It's fascinating when it does show up there
Mhm.
though in it, because it's coming at kind of the tail end of side A of the tape. And so you've had all these different kind of elements to build up to it, and then you have your deconstructed kit as it cuts into it, which is similar to some of the production you've used on Eisenberg's auto there. And it's gorgeous. It seriously is a phenomenal moment, reminding me of some mutual benefit stuff from
Sick.
Oh yeah.
Smashing Diamonds.
Mhm.
And then yeah, the Godspeed came to mind because they had gotten the Elazo that had happened in Montreal with their student tuition protest in 2012, and that played a role in Melodic and the band Ought. So yeah.
I had no idea that I mean, I haven't checked in with any Godspeed beyond like Mr. Skinny Fist.
Yeah.
You know, lately, which is probably an error on my part, because that seems to be like directly within the line of the. It was like, so you're saying it was like literally Casa Lazo protest in Montreal that they
Yes,
caught?
that students were
Mhm.
banging pots and pans out of frustration and anger with tuition hikes that they were not in favor of at all. And it
Damn.
was Montreal, you know, in Quebec, already a very radical state that like could have just seceded but didn't. So there was already these tensions only 16 years beyond that secession. Like this is where it comes into with students. And that
I
was
hope
Godspeed.
that's amazing. I hope it doesn't read like I'm like lifting directly from the record, because I've literally never heard it.
No, it's just one of those things where it came up and I'm like, oh, I could see how someone arrived at this or got to it on their own. Because also you've talked about like this is a political recording, even though this isn't, you know, a piece of maybe political music in the same way that like what More Mother is doing right now.
Yeah, totally. I don't see this as like a I mean, I only see it kind of like indirectly as like political. I mean, I made this shit when I was like holed up, you know, in my apartment, kind of thinking about, you know, back when we could, you know, like back when contact or like chance it could be a thing, and you wouldn't have to like look the other way. You know, I don't know. I mean, that again, that whole time was like a very you know, sort of apolitical zone.
Yeah.
You know, for me. And I mean, it was before, I mean, these tours were before, you know, I think like, you know, Ferguson or like Orlando or like any of the other stuff, you know, predating Trump. So it was like, we were not in any like zone where we were thinking about, you know, the broader scope of things. So it was definitely like a, you know, come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can see that. I've talked with other people online who kind of done stuff for indie hits with their writing series, and the most political albums people want to give for 2013 go to The Knifes, Shaking the Habitual, or Tim Hecker's Virgins, and kind of both of those for just what they were doing with noise almost. This wasn't a consideration in 2013 across the music landscape though. Yeah.
No, it's not.
So we're going to jump into some listener questions now. Are you down for that?
Yeah, sure. Did you get any?
We got a few, yeah.
All right.
You may know who they are though, but I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, hopefully Lucy Liu didn't ask anything.
So, anyway, so our,
crazy, but yeah,
our first question here is from our good friend Mark Mirza. And he said, it might be too personal or deep, but Nick and I lost a mutual friend, Eric Littman. And I just want to say, send my love to Nick and well wishes, and love him.
Oh yeah, I'll talk about Eric, definitely. Yeah, what a profound and like devastating loss to like the entire, you know, New York, you know, sort of community. I mean, some people that I've talked about before, Tyler Onderi, like, you know, like that. I mean, that is like a very close knit group of people. He was just like always. I mean, have you guys ever heard like Steve Sobs or any of that work at all?
Fortunately not.
So he had his own project, Steve Sobs, and then he had like a little you know, artist collective that would like occasionally put out, you know, sort of like mixtape style collaborative releases under Phantom Posse. Somehow he worked with like I Love McConan pretty extensively.
That's insane.
So like yeah, that was like his kind of like DIY indie project that he was involved with. But yeah, he kind of got, I first met him in Chicago, probably like at a backyard, you know, show. That I think it was like at Tyler's like space where he was like living at the time. And he just was like very initially he was just initially very like warm and welcoming without even really like knowing each other. And then yeah, we ended up in New York and would like frequent this. He would like pretty much when I like moved to New York and I was like going to like Silent Barn shows like pretty much every week. And he was like always there, either like running sound or, you know, like you know, playing in bands and stuff. And he I don't know. He contributed to. I mean, he's one of his deepest collaborators was Julie Byrne. He like produced
Oh wow.
the last two the last Julie Byrne album, A Bada Bing, and then he also worked on like Vagabonds music. So yeah, there's definitely like he was a bit of a 6 degrees of separation, figure within the whole landscape. And he was also like a biologist.
Oh wow.
Actually,
That's
so
sick.
he had like a day job that paid and like still showed up to like Silent Barn, and I don't know, he was just such a cultivator of community, and like
That's awesome.
I'm so shocked that he's no longer with us, because he's one of the total sweet, like not a bad bone in his body. I can talk a lot of shit on Brooklyn DIY people, but not one of he's not one of them for sure.
Wow. That was beautiful. I'm really sorry that you guys lost such an important person. Yeah. I mean, I have never experienced that, and I really hope I don't have to at some point, but wow, that's great.
Yeah, we don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah. So, anyways, we have another question here from Lucy Liu. And
not an amusement, looking good.
Yeah, this is a big one here. So it says gay son or whore daughter.
Why not both?
Yeah, there it is, dude. Why not both?
Like I mean, we're all gay and
exactly.
I'm trying to clap. I don't know if it's picking it up, but
I slightly heard it. Yeah, slightly heard it. We'll get some claps.
I let me say that I love Lucy a lot. We're actually working on music together. I might be producing a record of theirs. Or we are working on a record.
That's amazing.
That will probably, it's going to be a while probably before it comes out. They have like a lot of projects sort of in the pipeline before it happens, but that's in the works, and it's definitely like younger sibling energy.
Yeah.
Sure.
We love Lucy. Man. We interviewed Lucy a few months back, I believe, right?
No, I saw.
Yeah.
Before the Them piece had come out.
Yeah. And before the Them piece came out. And Lucy's just great. We love Lucy. Lucy's amazing. Their record is tight, and can't wait to see more of their work.
Yeah, Lucy's great. It's so wild because like, they come out the gate with like the most like at like 20, 21 years old, like a few years ago with like that record Welfare, which is like the most, by and large, like the most original, like experimental, music that I've heard in so long. And then you talk to them and they're like, Robert Ashley, who? I like Mariah. I love Mariah.
I know, dude.
And it's just
it's crazy.
What are you in touch with?
Yeah,
this is the
straight up.
That you're making,
just a completely different like aesthetic tradition, center notion of identity, just like center of like ideas.
I've been having a lot of fun sending them like Salmon Run by Graham Lampkin and being or like whatever.
Yeah. And
just showing them like, okay, like this is like a little bit what you're in touch with. And then they're just like, Nick, this is terrifying.
I think even when I wrote it, tabs out, I'm like, yeah, there's a bit of David Sylvian on here, because just part of it felt like a weird energy of like early 80s kind of like typing on a Commodore console.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, kind of text adventures. And it was like, how the hell did you come up with this?
They are also a complete beast on the piano.
Yes, right? Aren't they classically trained?
I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, aren't they classically trained on piano? I'm trying to remember back.
I think that was kind of like sort of a nature of like their upbringing and stuff, is that they did like classical music super young. But yeah, just like a lot of the way that we've been working has been like, sort of piano centric, and then like, kind of me doing like a lot of MIDI stacking and stuff
Yeah,
around like their performances. It's going to be, I mean, we're still in the very nascent stages, but it's going to be really sick when that comes together. So yeah, might be probably 2 or 3 years from now. So maybe hyping it up a little too soon.
That's okay.
But yeah, I love Lucy.
Yeah, we love
sure.
Lucy too. Definitely looking forward to the work you guys are working on together. So that brings us about to the end of the interview. Where can people keep up with all things Nick Zanca?
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and I am still occasionally writing for Tone Glow these days. If you want to hear my musical opinions and stuff. But yeah, Elazo will come out in October. I think if you are just arriving, welcome. If you've kind of been with me since the beginning, I realize that this is a very different body of work, and I am sorry, but I hope you are along for the ride, anyway.
Well, you have at least Maddie and I along for the ride, and we can't wait.
Love to hear.
Yeah, Andrew Weathers is a good friend of us, so it's super sick that you're putting this out with Full Spectrum.
Can we talk about him real quick?
And
sure. The whole I feel the need to shout out what Full Spectrum is doing, because they're really having like such a bang up year between the Lucy thing and stuff.
Marsha.
Yeah, there are like a few other records. Honestly, the the like 2 tape record that Andrew just put out.
Andrew's record, right?
Is like phenomenal. It's like you're embodying like land art principles to music, which I've never really seen done on the level that he. But like, yeah, I definitely could have spent like a lot more time like shopping this record around, but they have such a very specific sense of just like creative control for the giving artists like total carte blanche with the projects that they put out. And he's been a firm believer in this body of music pretty much from the first I sent it to him. And yeah, him and Gretchen are great, and like the whole Yano Escatado scene.
Oh yeah, they're holding that scene down. Like, they're holding that scene down.
I am definitely trying to. Mari and I have kind of been discussing making our next record IRL, like in that zone, which I'm really hoping.
That would be sick.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
But, yeah, Full Spectrum forever.
Full Spectrum forever. Definitely
Infinite
couldn't.
Futures.
What'd you say, Maddie?
Infinite Futures.
Yep.
Full Spectrum.
Yeah, there you go.
Definitely couldn't see a better label to put this out with. And Andrew just has like such a clear sense of like what DIY music should be, and I think that's one of the reasons I like love him so much. Like everything he does, he's always like, yeah, it's like pay what you want. Like you don't have to like pay me like top dollar or anything. I'm not gonna ask for it either. And it's just like that's sick. And you have this like co-op.
Yeah, when do you
like,
ever see
space? Like it's just sick, dude. And he has like a lot of clout too, so he definitely could like not be like that, but he still chooses to be, which I think is awesome. So
I mean, he only masters everybody's
literally everyone. It's insane. It's literally insane.
Masters.
Honestly, he brought the record that I made to like a completely different level. So yeah, I'm very thankful for him and Gretchen and Carl, that whole team.
Yeah.
Love them.
Yep. So anyways, we're running on about 5% on this phone here that I am talking on. So we should probably get wrapping up soon, but we have one more question for you, Nick. Are you ready for it? It's the biggest question of the show.
I think I know what it's going to be, and go ahead.
So
all right, Nick, you're pulling out your Mark Hollis Bada Bing 2011 reissue vinyl there. And
I have the test pressing.
Oh no, what's that? There's a Mark Hollis rat in there and he's gonna jump in your mouth. It's a head or a butt, and why?
Has anyone ever answered butt? to this question?
Actually, yeah, yesterday when I interviewed this band, they said but.
Because here's the thing, because it's like, I mean, it's like a projectile thing. There's no way that it's gonna like parkour into like.
Well, we usually have
apart
to.
from the fact that it's like gross, you know, like there's no way that it's gonna like naturally. I mean, but you've had this question before.
Yeah,
You probably
so
have a different.
I thought of the scenario, so let me lay it out for you. So like, just think like you're chilling there, you're listening to your Mark Hollis record, and you're just having such a like, oh my God moment, and you look up into the
You
sky.
saw the bridges.
Yeah. Your mouth is open and this rat just falls from the rafters. Think like a Ratatouille moment here, and the rat just plop right into your mouth as you're just like, oh my God, Mark Hollis, and then rat in your mouth. There it is, like tail down your throat, everything.
All right. This answer is still and always going to be.
Why though?
You know, you can have the Ozzy Osbourne moment and bite it off, and which I'm sure someone has probably mentioned that before. I don't know. Might be time to find a new question, guys.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, this
I feel like, I do not to harp on your question because they've all been great, but I feel like there are very the range of answers are very
you'd be surprised. We get some crazy ones every now and then.
All right. Well,
every now and then. But
I trust you.
Yeah, it was so awkward. Like a couple weeks ago, we interviewed Lena Tolgren, and they like literally just paused in silence, and we're like, "Why is this even a question?" And me and Maddie were just like, "Ah, shit, did we ask this to the wrong person?" Like,
oh my God, I do love Lena.
Mm-hmm.
That whole that visiting record is like some of the hardest improv I've heard. Like,
yeah,
I love it. I could go on and on, but I won't.
Shout out to visiting as well. I know you had reviewed that, and I also too love that one. I love Lena's work.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh God, in that moment, like, oh no.
I know. We're just like, we offended them. They're never gonna talk to us again.
Nothing worse than feeling like you've offended someone in an interview. I've been there.
Exactly. Sure. And we're just like, oh man, this is awkward.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways,
This is
I think that's all we have for today. So everybody listening, thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. and NetNet Radio every Saturday at 4 p.m. And if you're listening on KCSB, be sure to stick around after the show so you can catch Wayne Lightalk's show immediately following. This is Nick Zanca. Thanks again, Nick.
Happy to be here.